Okay, tonight's speaker is Katie from Fair Oaks.
Hi, I'm Katie Heilman. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Carrie, for asking me, and thanks, Tony, for sitting up front with me. So, couple things to start out. First, welcome if you're new. And just, I like to say that I'm not an authority on Alcoholics Anonymous at all. I'm just going to hopefully share a little bit of my experience, and hopefully you hear the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is that AA works. AA's changed my life, and I'm forever grateful for it. So if that's all you hear, I hope that's it, but I'm not an authority on Alcoholics Anonymous. Couple really important things. I have a sobriety date. It's January 17th, 2006. That means this morning I woke up with 4,805 days of continuous sobriety without the desire to drink today or self-destruct, which is an absolute miracle in my life. You guys know, a lot of you have heard, I like warm vodka, okay? Really like to drink warm vodka. So the fact that I haven't wanted to drink in that amount of time is simply a miracle. I have a sponsor who knows that she is my sponsor. Her name's Tamara. She's usually sitting right there. And I'm so grateful to have regular contact with a sponsor. Staying current with a sponsor is something that I really value today. I used to have 911 sponsors. I also used to have a 911 God, and that didn't work out very well. So seeing a sponsor on a regular basis, calling a sponsor on a regular basis has been just proved to be invaluable. And I also have a home group. That's my AA address, and it's Monday nights, 450 Blue Ravine is this night. 410 Wool Street. Doors open at 7, meeting starts at 8. It's called the Folsom Big Book Group, and that's where you'll find me on Monday nights unless I'm sick or out of town. And I'm really grateful for that home group, really super grateful. And so those three things are like my personal triangle in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? We have our AA triangle, our three legacies of recovery, service, and unity, and my personal one is home group, sobriety date, and sponsor. Everything else builds upon that, right? Those are absolutely essential. So I told you I really like to drink, right? I'm a warm vodka drinker, not because I like the way it tastes. Certainly not. I like the effect, and I drink purely for effect. And I drink differently than most of my peers, starting out right away. And you know what's interesting is. So I had my first drunk when I was 13 years old, and I can't tell you what happened on my 13th birthday, what I wore on the first day of school, what happened at Christmas, but I can tell you every single moment of that end of November in 1997. Every moment, you know? So I'm this really awkward 13-year-old, and I'm with a new best friend at a new school, and she looks like she's 21 at 13, and I really wanted what she had, which was like being able to talk to boys, and she was just beautiful. And she mixed together some alcohol in a red Solo cup, and I found my solution. I remember it like it was yesterday, like taking those first couple swigs off of that red Solo cup, and like the burn down my throat, and like the sensation in my gut, and how like it felt like I had been holding my breath my whole life, and I could finally take a deep breath, and like the weight of the world had been on my shoulders because I'm like awkward and I feel so different. I can't talk to anyone, and I spent most of my junior years in like the bathroom drying the sweat off of my sweat marks, you know, just like so nervous and awkward. And like I took a couple drinks and like my training bra came off, and you know, I am like something, right? And I felt like this girl, right? And this is so weird, but I have to describe it. I had like some really weird phobias, and I had this really weird phobia about like going to the bathroom in public, or like anything to do with the bathroom. And it's so weird. But I got kind of drunk. I had you know a glass, and then another glass, and I'm like I knew exactly what to do. Like give me more. Like, man, this really would have helped in kindergarten. And and I'm drinking that, and there was like these bathroom jokes on the wall, and I started like reading them out loud, and like we were laughing. Like she was laughing, not at me, like with me, and I was laughing, and this felt like freedom. I felt like I was free. It was like the greatest night of my life, and I wanted to feel like that forever. And I woke up the next day, like I got like really drunk because I knew exactly what to do, and I threw up and got sick, and like I couldn't wait to do it again. Absolutely couldn't wait. And so, like, being a teenage alcoholic, right, my stories are just kind of sad, and I don't really remember a lot of them, or they're told to me secondhand. Because I'm a blackout drinker, I've had thousands of DUIs. I've just never gotten caught, like a really good drunk driver. So I don't really have anything really cool to tell you other than, I mean, the only thing that ever changed with my drinking was the shoes and the guy, you know? And so when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, like, I'm really grateful that no one told me that I was too young. You know, so I only really drank for about 6 years, and the Big Book is super clear about what alcoholism is, and it's that we've lost the ability to control our drinking. And in fact, it talks specifically about young people and women. It says we're often gone beyond recall in a few short years, and I identified with that. Because I made my first solemn oath when I was 15 that I was never going to drink again. I had drank a bottle of gin. I was like 98 pounds and had a case of some pretty severe alcohol poisoning. Social work at the hospital that I had been at for a couple days assumed that it was a suicide attempt. I wasn't able to say. I was just trying to have a good time. Overshot the mark a little bit, right? And so I was 5150'd and taken away from my parents and placed in a psychiatric ward and at 15. And again, it's one of those moments I'll never forget. My mom and my dad and my brother walking in to this place, and I still had throw up in my hair from 3 days before. I'd cracked a full-length mirror with my head, and my dad, who we didn't really express feelings. I had never seen him cry. Was kind of wailing out loud, and held me and asked aloud what he had done wrong. And man, guys, I want to be a good kid. You know, I love my parents. I wanted to make the right decision. I just could never really quite do it. And I remember swearing I was never going to drink again. I meant it. If you had given me a lie detector test, I would have passed, right? I was drunk the next weekend. So the absolute baffling feature of alcoholism is that I cannot remember with sufficient force the pain and the suffering of a day or a week ago. And I'm sure that my thought process was, well, it probably wasn't that bad. You're being a little hasty with this no drinking forever thing, Katie, right? And so yeah, at 15, I crossed the line right there. And by the time I was 19, I was coming to a lot while driving, which was freaking me out a little bit. So I was it's probably a lot better if I just stay in my dorm room. I would usually find a way to get that warm fifth of Popov. And I would just guzzle that with, some, a blunt and a 5-pack pepperoni pizza Hot Pocket, a Disney movie, and a pen and a paper on a Tuesday night, and I'd write about what that movie was really about. I have theses on Alice in Wonderland and Aladdin, and I just had a great time being in my dorm room with my fifth of Pop-Off. And I thought that was completely normal behavior. So I'm, at this point in my life, I'm a hardcore militant atheist, I will debate with you the existence of God. I will win, you poor people of faith. I feel so bad for you. It's amazing looking back and seeing these little breadcrumbs to God and all these perfect little moments that had to happen for me to get to be here and how God was involved the whole time. Because it doesn't make any sense to me how I found my way into Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're here tonight and you're wondering why you're here, the miracle's always in the rearview mirror. Just stay long enough to see it, because I can see it very clearly today. And what I can see is, so I have a sobriety date when I was 21, but I found my way into Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 19. And how I got there was I was a nanny. I had this awesome killer nanny job, actually. I was taken to St. Croix. This family had an estate on this island. I got to nanny this 3-year-old and this 9-month-old. I was drunk the whole time. I don't remember any of it. I was calling all my friends in blackouts. And so all these things were happening when I was out of the country that led to me getting into AA. But my first last drink was in a bar, and I was pounding my 16th beer. I really liked counting my beers. I'd pre-partied with the 4 shots before, and then I'm on my 16th and I blacked out, and I woke up the next day and it was 3 in the afternoon. According to the wall, there was a baby on the floor, but it wasn't the baby I was supposed to be nannying. There were birds everywhere. It was like, what is that movie? The Hangover or whatever? It was so bizarre. And I was supposed to start nannying at 7 in the morning. I had no idea where it was. So I was I'd woken up in varied states before, you guys, but this was a little jarring. And I walked into the house that I was supposed to be nannying, that little 3-year-old girl. I loved this girl a lot. She was the sweetest thing. I'd never forget her looking at me terrified, asking Mommy, what's wrong with Katie? And I was excused and went to the bathroom, and I'm black and blue. And the miracle is, the next day I was on a flight home to the United States where my parents were holding an intervention. If it had been a day later, a week later, I would have had a rationale, a justification, an excuse, something. But I was just broken enough that when all these people around me were saying there's something really wrong with you, I was willing to maybe admit that was true. And I was willing to go to this, they were we want you to just talk to someone. So I went to this intake facility where they were this guy was asking me all the questions, that are yes or no answers, but I'm responding with essay responses. What do you, did you drink in the morning? What do you consider morning? I mean, that's not, right? I mean, there's varied responses there. And this guy asks me all these questions and kind of being smart, and he puts down the paper and he looks at me and he says, in my professional opinion, you're not going to make it past your 21st birthday. And then he started to kind of share a little bit about alcoholism. And he specifically used the words restless, irritable, and discontent. And I had never heard 3 words put together that I related to more in my whole life. And this man was sharing stuff, and I related to him. He was 65 years old. I hadn't related to anyone my own age ever, and I'm relating to this 65-year-old guy. And what he said was, right, that I'm going to die, and give me 30 days, and we might be able to help change your life. And I had a moment of clarity. And that moment of clarity is where God paralyzes the liar in me long enough for me to hear the truth. And I heard it. And the miracle of it is that I didn't want to die. So I've been suicidal my whole life. I had started having suicidal tendencies when I was 10. I have them in my journals. I mean, maybe it's romanticized, but still I was thinking these things. And what I think today is alcohol kept me alive long enough for me to find Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I say yes to I don't even know what. I think maybe they're going to teach me how to drink normally. I don't really know what's going to, I've been experimenting for years. Maybe they have the magic. Maybe there's maybe I've been eating the wrong food before. Maybe I need to switch from vodka back to something else. And what I started to learn is that the only solution for alcoholism is entire abstinence. Are you joking? I mean, this was the worst news I could possibly imagine. Entire abstinence. I'm relating to everyone. I'm relating to everything, and I find out that alcoholism is progressive. And that's the only solution. And I am mad. I don't know if you guys grieved alcohol, but I grieved. I mean, alcohol was my absolute best friend. I could not imagine what my life was going to be like without it. And I knew my life was now over. I was 19 at the time. This is still before my sobriety date. And I am, I've been given a bad hand in life. I grew up in the hard streets of Granite Bay, and it's real hard. And now this, and this God that I didn't believe in, I'm real mad at him. And I went to an H&I meeting at the intake I was at, and I was given a big book. Someone just gave me one. It was amazing. They would just give me a free book. And I never been to an AA meeting. I didn't have a sponsor, and I opened it up. It's war fever ran high. That's weird. I'll read We Agnostics because that relates to me. And another one of those, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was smoking 800 cigarettes at one time, underlining every single line in that chapter. It was the most true thing I'd ever read. And there's that part that Bill writes about, we miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we're diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. Maybe I'd been prejudiced. Just maybe. I had this little bit of maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I could be wrong. Whoa. And what I did is I was 6 days sober. I was so mad, you guys. I was so angry. What am I going to do on my 21st birthday? And like, what am I going to do when I get married? And what am I going to do on New Year's Eve? Okay, it was June. I didn't even have a boyfriend, but like these are really big pressing problems. And I said that little alcoholic prayer, which is help. And I opened myself up to like this concept of a higher power. And what happened for me is I was like filled from the top of my head to my toes with like serenity and warmth and peace. And it was probably 30 seconds. But it was better than the feeling I had with the first drink, right? And I heard this inner voice say, this is not a curse, it's a gift, it's a relationship with me. And that was an amazing thing. And I'd love to tell you now that I like stayed sober and, was like a perfect AA member and like I drank again. So like what happened, And again, this is my experience. I'm not an authority on Alcoholics Anonymous, but for me, like I read We Agnostics, so I knew that I had to have one of those spiritual experiences. And I thought that that's maybe what it was, And what I think for me that was a first contact with God. I had been so far away and so angry that my first contact was so momentous and beautiful. But it's not what's spelled out to be a spiritual experience like it talks about in Appendix 2 in the back of the book, which is a complete transformation, like an overhaul of who and what I am to my core. I stopped drinking and I'm left with me. Nothing changed. The only thing I did was stop drinking. And, I walked around with some untreated alcoholism for a little while. I was definitely a meeting attender. I was not a AA member. And being just an attender looks like, I would just show up whenever I felt like it. I would leave the meeting in the middle to go smoke because that's really, I don't want to hear what that person has to say. And I didn't get a job. I didn't have any service. I had a sponsor who was very well-meaning but told me I couldn't work a 4-step till I had a year sober. And so I'm just kind of like stuck and not doing any steps, and I'm angry. And my mom told me when I was 6 months sober she preferred me drunk because at least I was kind. Because my mother who stayed up every night my whole teens thinking she was going to get a phone call that I was dead, right? And what it felt like, the best way I can describe it is like someone like peeled off all my skin with a potato skin peeler and I'm walking through a salt fog. Like everything hurts. Like that's what untreated alcoholism feels like to me. And I tried to commit suicide when I was 9 months sober. And it was I was just absolutely miserable. That's the best way. I had to drink again. And what happened is I appreciate this story and I appreciate being able to tell it because it reminds me of what I'm dealing with. And I was 18 months undrunk in Alcoholics Anonymous, being a meeting attender. And I was getting on a plane to go to Europe. And I sat down on the plane and someone said, do you want a drink? And my thought process was, maybe I should tell them that I don't drink alcohol and they'll probably figure it out. Sure. And then the flight attendant came down the aisle and I'm like, maybe I should like wave her down and say, don't put alcohol in that. I'm like, oh, she probably knows I don't drink. She won't do that. And then the drink comes my way. I'm like, wonder if I should smell it or ask if there's alcohol in it. And then that happened. Instant. The relief was instant. And the burn came down and I went, yeah, I'll have another one of those. Pop some Klonopin, I'll have another, feeling pretty good now. And I blacked out. So apparently what I was told later is that like I was cut off by the flight attendant. So I went and stole a bottle of wine from the back of the plane. And then I woke up in Rome. And that was like the beginning of my last debauch. And what's incredible about that is you guys, it like blows me away. I went to go study early Christian art in Italy, France, and England. So I was in like an alcoholic blackout through the holiest sites in Europe, literally carried by angels. That's how I feel about it today. But so my last drink was January 16th. It's my mom's birthday. Didn't know it was my mom's birthday. I was just in my own world, and this is again my thought process. Well, I've never drank in a fancy Italian restaurant in Florence, Italy. Maybe I'll handle myself differently. I've never drank wine from a bottle, only a box. Maybe I'll handle myself differently. And what happened was I had 3 glasses of wine. I had 3 glasses of wine, and then it was on. You know that feeling? It's like you don't realize how much you need to breathe until a paper bag's put over your head. And I'm like suffocating, you know? And I find it's so weird. Like the bars were all closed. It was like a Sunday or something, and like I convinced a bartender to sell us like a half full handle of Smirnoff for like 60 euros, which is like far too much. And I'm taking shot after shot in my hotel room with my friends, and I'm like throwing up. I'm getting sick. They're like, Katie, this isn't fun. I'm like, yes, it is. And you know, I'm getting drunker and drunker and drunker, and I'm not feeling any better. It was like the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. It's like not getting the relief, you know. And I woke up the next day on January 17th, and that's my day. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 19, scared, and I showed up when I was 21, surrendered. I was pretty surrendered. And what came into my mind as I was in this Florence hotel sitting in the back stairs and decided to call my sponsors, I thought about you guys. I thought about your faces, and I thought about your stories, and I thought about the hope that I knew that was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And 3 days later, it's a very foggy period. I'd been taking a lot of pills too, and so I'd stopped taking all those, and I'm feeling weird, but I'm in Paris now, and the next thing I remember is coming to, and I'm in front of this 800-year-old church on the Seine, and I walk into the basement, and there's an AA meeting. And it's an English-speaking meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's a big book study. And they're reading chapter 3 more about alcoholism. Like, that's how my God works, you know, like makes it real clear. And I had this unbelievable, like, feeling that Alcoholics Anonymous is so much bigger than I can ever imagine. So much bigger. Like, there's AA all over the world right this minute, you know? And people are doing it like out of the book and like the way that's been suggested for the past 85 years, you know? And it was just like so overwhelming and incredible, and I'm so grateful. And, you know, just a quick like jump forward, like AA being much bigger than I can imagine. You know, today I have the incredible privilege and honor to serve Alcoholics Anonymous at our General Service Board as an appointed committee member to the Trustees Literature Committee. And seeing Alcoholics Anonymous in that way, and like, you guys, I want to share with you that our trustees are incredible servants to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the feeling that I constantly get is AA is lovingly held like this, very lovingly. And we're about to have our big annual business meeting with our agenda topics, and this group has a GSR, and oh my gosh, you guys, the trustees want to hear from you. Your opinion means so much, and they are people of integrity, so what you say, they will do. So I hope that you're really excited for this time of year. I know I am. So at this point, I'd love to tell you, too, that I'm like a perfect AA member and everything's great, and I just skipped off into the AA sunset and everything was great, and it wasn't. You know, like I said, I'm still left with me, and who I am is selfish to the core, and self-centered and grandiose and immature, and you know, and I'm 21, and I got to make a lot of mistakes in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got to grow up in AA, and I'm super grateful. I had some really wonderful mentors and sponsors, and my first sponsor walked me through the book, and I got to make some really great amends, and I got to start to have some great stories about the miracles of AA, right? Like, I had this great story about, I got to make amends to my grandma, for the last year before she passed, and I got to look her in the eye, and we got to be good. This woman that I hated and was horrible to, and I could get up to the podium and tell that story and make people weep, and I started to, you know, like, yeah, I got things to say, and start parodying some people and sounding good, and I get 5 years sober, and that's cool, and I get married, and all these great things start to happen, and those kids that I nannied, like, they stood up at my wedding. Like, amazing stuff. I got to make amends to that family. And then, you know, what I started doing is, AA was kind of like, check, you know, like, I did all the steps, check, you know, I kind of had some clout, and I got some good stories. I could talk good in front of the podium, like, and AA started to get inconvenient, you know. And I stopped doing a lot of things. I never stopped going to meetings, but I stopped, like, living the program, like applying the principles in my life. And at like 6.99 years sober, Tony asked me to speak at this meeting, and I was actually dying of alcoholism. It's about 6 years ago. And what I can tell you is I was trying to find the right words to tell my dad I never wanted to see him or talk to him again. My mom and I got into a physical altercation. I was uninvited to some family events. My coworker emailed me to never speak to me again. She worked right next to me. I'm just a real vision for you, And this woman started appearing in my life, and she usually sits there, and I don't even know. She was so happy, and it drove me crazy. Like people would line up to say, she started appearing all over the place. I'm watching people line up to say goodbye to her, and like, she's beautiful, and like, how dare she do those things, be so happy. And, I'm miserable. And I was invited to come to this meeting, and I didn't want anything to do with you guys. You were all so happy. I mean, some of you might remember that. And it was rough there for a minute. But what started to happen is I wanted to drive my car off the Folsom Bridge. And I was like clenching the steering wheel so hard when I was on the freeway. I knew I couldn't drink, but I didn't want to live the way I was living. And so for some reason I asked this woman to sponsor me, and she was just as surprised as I was. And luckily she's a very kind servant in Alcoholics Anonymous and said yes to someone who was very mean to her. And, thank you. What I love is, the first step principle is honesty. And one of the dictionary definitions that I love is freedom from deceit. And I started to get really, really honest about what I was actually doing in Alcoholics Anonymous, and which wasn't much in terms of actually applying the principles. And I got to go back to the steps with a sponsor, and for me, again, not authority on Alcoholics Anonymous, but this is my experience, which was I hadn't been really doing a 10th step at all. And I was just letting all these resentments build up in my life. And I hated most of you guys. Like, I hated most of the people in AA, hated most of my home group members. The home group member that's like would be much better served in another home group, That was like most of the people in my home group. And I realized that, I justified resentments. In my mind, I was completely able to have these. And I went back through this fourth step with a sponsor, and what was different for me is the fourth column. And I had always had sponsorship, and again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is just my own brain. I always had sponsorship that said the fourth column was my part. And in my head, this causes a problem, because if there's my part, then that means there's a part for you. And then there's a parts pie, and I'm dividing up the parts, and I'm going to give you more of the part than me, right? And I'm still mad at you. And what I did with this sponsor is my fourth column is, where am I to blame? Where am I at fault? Where did I set the ball rolling? And in my mind, those are, and again, this is for me, it's like very, very different terminology. And so what started happening is I started having a new experience with all this anger that I had. So I had this person in my home group, we didn't like each other, mutual hatred. We didn't talk to each other for like a year and a half, even though we saw each other every single week. Like, I hated this guy, gossiped about him, he gossiped about me. It's fine, it's great behavior. And I remember my sponsor going like, wow, I get to walk into any room and be able to look anyone in the eye. I didn't even know that's what I wanted, And I started doing that fourth column, like, where am I to blame? And I started to see that everything I hated about that guy was actually a direct reflection of my own behavior, and that he was a perfect mirror for me. Ouch. And I'd been praying for him for like a long time, but that sick man prayer where it's like, oh God, look at that sick man. I'm going to pray for this sick man. Oh, he's so sick. Like that type of self-righteous praying. And instead, my sponsor suggested that maybe like I pray sincerely, and maybe I pray for everything that I want for myself for him. And I started doing that on my knees. And prayer on my knees was actually a life-changing thing. I'd never done that until I was 7 years sober when a sponsor suggested it. And for me, it's essential. I'm a daily yoga practitioner, and there's something that happens in the physical plane that then translates to the spiritual. And for me, I have to get on my knees to humble myself before my Creator. And I started doing that, and I prayed a prayer for him morning and night for 5 days. And on the end of that 5th day, I walked into my Friday night meeting, and he was there, and he walked straight up to me after we hadn't spoken to each other in a year and a half. And my sponsor told me that not only will your heart change, but his might change as well. As he walked up to me with tears in his eyes, asked if he could speak to me outside. And he said that the night before he had had a dream about me. And in his dream he was making amends to me. And he did. And I got to make amends to him. And I can tell you, if he walked in this room tonight, I could look him in the eye and give him a hug and ask him about his daughters. And that's freedom. That's freedom. And then I got to go back through and look at what was the problem with my dad. And it was really a resentment with his wife. And unfortunately, that amends didn't go as well. I got to ask the question, how is it like to be your stepdaughter? And she let me know. And I needed to be humbled in that way. It was very important. But what happened is I started to take different action after that feasting on some humble pie. And my relationship with my father completely changed. For the first 7-8 years of my sobriety, my dad would constantly be like, you have to keep going to those A&A things, he didn't get it. And when I was like 9 years sober, he was interviewed. He's a CIO for a large IT firm company, and they asked, who is your role model? And he said, my daughter. She's an incredible example of principled action. And that's not me, that's you guys. That's you guys showing me how to live a different way of life, I'm so grateful. This was the first year, 13 years sober, my dad remembered my sobriety date, and he called me and wished me happy 13 years of sobriety. It's pretty amazing, thank you. And then, I had a really, really big resentment, a justified one. And this man real justified. Most people would have agreed with me. There was some real physical harm, and this person started showing up in my life everywhere, at the dry cleaner, at Nordstrom, and I started just praying about it. When I was 7 years sober, I really started taking my spiritual life seriously and started practicing daily meditation. And I started bringing this into meditation, and I knew what I was supposed to do. And through a crazy series of events, we were linked up. We had to meet at Starbucks. I had something to give him. It's truly crazy how God works. It's a long story. I can't get into it. But I got to meet with this person, and I found I actually had amends to make to him. And I thought I was going to do it, and I was going to grab my coffee, and I was going to go. And what happened is he walked up to him, and I saw God's kid. And we got to sit, and we talked for an hour. And the forgiveness was overwhelming, and he got to share with me how he felt in high school, and I got to share with him what it was like for me. And he disappeared. I never saw him again, but if I did, I'd be able to walk up to him and give him a hug. That's freedom. And you guys, this meeting has, I can't tell you what this meeting's been for me. 4 years ago, I got to be the secretary of this group, and at this exact time, 4 years ago, I was going through the worst grief of my life, and I couldn't get off the ground, and was, I didn't sleep for days. I was obsessing about drinking NyQuil, and but I got to be of service to this group, and I got to show up. Thank God it doesn't matter what I think or feel. It just matters what I do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got to just keep showing up, and you guys showed me what it looked like to walk through pain and walk through grief. And I'm very, very grateful. And like I said, I'd been practicing all this meditation. I never thought that I was ever going to feel better. I thought this pain was going to last forever, and the grief I had was never going to go away. And I went into meditation, and I started getting all these flashes because I'm angry at God again. I've been cursed. I've been forsaken. And I started getting all these images of all the bad things that had happened in my time in recovery, and they all kind of made me laugh at this point. They're all things that weren't a big deal. And I was flashed back all the way to my first prayer at 6 days sober, that it was the worst thing I could ever imagine being an alcoholic. And now I know it's my greatest gift. And I heard the words again, this is not a curse, it's a gift, it's a relationship with me, and I got to dive deeper into my relationship with my God. And 2 years ago, my husband had this traumatic brain injury, and it was super crazy, and there's all these crazy events that happened during that time, and I really wish that Kate was here. Because a lot of you guys showed up for me when my husband was in the ICU. Tony showed up, and Rick showed up, and all these people came, but Kate especially, she showed up with a care package and some socks. Because Kate was going through nursing school, and she knew how cold the ICU was. And I wasn't prepared. And she brought me socks and kept my feet warm. And a year ago, my friend Aaron drowned. He was practicing meditation underwater. He was my yoga teacher and friend, and he was in the ICU. And I got to bring his girlfriend socks. That's what the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. You guys get to show me how to live differently today, how to think about others, how to show up in big, incredible, beautiful ways and walk through all sorts of things that life throws at me, you know. What I want to end with is, I want to end with service, I think. You know, there's this really great Tagore quote. He's a Bengali poet, and he said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. And that's been my experience in AA. It's like pretty unbelievable that the more I find that I give to Alcoholics Anonymous, the more that I receive in incredible ways. The more I give to my group, to my district, to the area, to the General Service Board, to the women I sponsor, to my, to the people at work, to my family. I'm just, you guys, it's the best deal in town. It just is. And it blows me away how someone like me could receive everything that I've gotten in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is like a truly incredible life. Aside from the fact that I don't have to drink today, I get to be a woman of dignity and grace, and that's because of all of you, so thank you.